Hey there, welcome back to your daily dose of anime recaps. In this video, we're going to be going over the first season of the manhwa series, I Grow Stronger by Eating. In this world, Mr. Kim, otherwise known as Pet Shop, has a unique ability to absorb the skills of the living beings that he eats. After being transported to a faraway fantasy land filled with monsters, Pet Shop is motivated to do one thing, and one thing alone: become the absolute strongest to exist. Before we continue, make sure to hit that bell button and become a subscriber so you never miss an update from us. The series begins by introducing a man with a unique talent. His unknown talent allows him to become a poacher in Africa. Although, before we even learn his name, he's captured by an international agency. We finally learn his moniker, Pet Shop, the internationally wanted criminal. The man who set him up, Eddie Montoya, works for the UN Special International Police Agency. He lists his crimes of murder, poaching, smuggling, fraud, and the list goes on. However, after being arrested, it seems as though things aren't quite normal with this Pet Shop man. We find out about his ability to digest anything, and to use what he's digested to modify and enhance his own body. Finally, we learn his real name, Mr. Kim, and that he's notorious for using the money earned from his crimes to buy exotic animals. Hence the name Pet Shop. As we learn this, Pet Shop begins to transform into a grotesque chimera, a hybrid of a shark, human, and pangolin. He uses his brute strength to destroy the police van and escape, though things aren't exactly normal from here on out. 2 moons are in the sky, and dire wolves, golems, and dragons roam the forests. Somehow, Pet Shop has been transported to a mythical fantasy realm, and while a normal person might ordinarily be frightened at this, something inspiring stirs inside our protagonist. This new world intrigues Pet Shop, though before he has time to contemplate his situation, he's surrounded by a pack of giant wolves. Foolishly, the leader attacks him, and he metamorphoses into a silverback gorilla with a tiger's head. After killing the leader, the pack cower in fear and flee. Pet Shop enjoys his first meal in the new land, though he realizes that he wasn't able to skin the wolf as easily as he normally would. Pet Shop then comes to the conclusion that everything he knows is useless in this new land, and that he must find out why everything is different. He then spots a human, and while this happens, he explains the limitations of his powers. However, before he can talk to the human, he is killed by a razor-sharp deer horn. Regardless, Pet Shop consumes the human's brains in order to nourish himself with the man's knowledge. He learns this man's foreign language and also finds a bestiary containing information on all of the beasts on the island. We cut to a later date, and Pet Shop is experimenting on a regenerative troll. Meanwhile, at the Onyx Orcs clan, a prophetic figure speaks of an unimaginable monster. We're now in the Great Forest, which is troll territory. We watch these brutal monsters hunting for humans before one of them is murdered by Pet Shop. After retreating to his cave, the other trolls find Pet Shop there and prepare to attack. Not knowing the limit to his own strength, Pet Shop accidentally kills one of them, despite hoping to keep them as test subjects. The others fight back, and Pet Shop uses his venomous poisons to paralyze them. He slaughters the other 2 before continuing his experiments. He learns a few things. Skills don't work against organisms without skills, and that attacks that aren't skills also affect opponents with skills. With this knowledge, he realizes he can become the world's apex predator thanks to the lack of technology. He reveals his long-lasting dream of power, and he continues to consume, while a dragon flies overhead. We're introduced to a new area, Elmwood, which is under the protection of a goddess and her chosen warrior. This warrior is swiftly eaten and killed by a brutal monster, though he's then transported back to his 10-year-old self. Determined to one day stop the power-consuming monster, the boy grows up and brings up the issues with the ogres, and we realize it's the same prophecy-reciting figure from a few chapters ago. Meanwhile, Pet Shop is about to give up his experiments on the troll, though he soon finds out that you might be able to make a recovery potion from troll blood. He turns his attention to studying a great forest lizard man, an extremely powerful mammal reptile. Soon after, Pet Shop hunts and consumes a lizard man. After killing them, we see the weird slime creature from earlier, who seems to have a similar consumption-based ability as Pet Shop. The slime eats the corpses of the dead lizard men and gains their abilities, though the blonde prophetic hero from before now stands over the slime. The slime, who the warrior reads as pure evil, demands to know who he is. It seems as though both the slime and warrior have nothing but contempt for each other, and a fight instantly begins. Convinced he's the main character in this world, the slime is insulted by the warrior's stoicism. Meanwhile, the warrior seems to think that the slime is the monster of destruction from the prophecy. Using an extremely powerful attack, the Last Judgment, the warrior decimates his foe. We then return to Pet Shop, who decides he needs more lizard man guinea pigs to experiment on. He finds another lounge of lizards, and even though their attacks penetrate his skin, it regenerated instantly. He destroys them, and we see the warrior. He leaves the cave he destroyed the slime in and wanders off. However, the slime slowly regenerates, and Pet Shop returns infuriated his other lizard men have been eaten. Before he can react, the slime jumps at him. In a flashback, we see the slime's past life. Fat and greedy, he gives in to all of his instincts. He dies from his health at the age of 40, and wakes up in a strange land. Convinced that he was the main character of his own game, he thinks he's invincible. How wrong was he when he thought Pet Shop was merely prey? After attacking him with overconfidence, the slime kills himself by jumping into Mr. Kim's stomach. Pet Shop now realizes he has the ability to eat ores, since he's absorbed the power of a slime. Later on, we meet the dragon that Pet Shop dreams of consuming. The Red Flash, who dances in the sky as her worshippers call her, is not just a dangerous monster, but a caring mother too. Realizing she hasn't checked up on the lizard men in a while, she leaves her baby alone while she looks for them. After looking into the memories of the lizard men, Pet Shop realizes that now the baby is alone. He has the perfect opportunity to consume a dragon. The dragon tells her baby to stay home, no matter what, and protects it with a magical barrier surrounding their home. However, that doesn't matter to Pet Shop. 30 minutes ago, Pet Shop traversed the barrier, as it doesn't affect earthly beings. He climbs into the dragon's cave and, weirdly, is more infatuated with the dragon's treasures than the baby dragon. He knocks out the baby, and a week later, we see the dragon return. The baby tells the dragon mother about what happened, and she misunderstands and thinks the Orcs are responsible for the attack. We cut to the Orcs, who seemingly have picked up on strange clues that they are about to be attacked. Indeed, they are right, as the dragon mother now towers over their entire civilization. The Dragon Mother rampages on the Orcs, who realize they might be doomed. Regardless, they fight back. All of the Orcs in the forest fight back against the dragon, and though countless Orcs died, they eventually manage to slay the dragon. In the aftermath of the battle, we realize Pet Shop's plan was a conniving success. He feasts on the corpse of the dragon, absorbing all of her monstrous power. However, the baby dragon realizes it can no longer feel the presence of its mother. Furious, it seems as though anger gives the dragon power. It flies off in the hopes of avenging its parent. Meanwhile, Pet Shop has grown tired of the forest, as he's gotten everything he needs already. He pretends he has amnesia to a wandering worksman, who gives him a lift on the back of his cart. They talk, and Pet Shop learns all about the civilization he's heading to. He arrives at the city Santo Canalgo and is extremely surprised by the cleanliness and hygiene of the place. He learns from some commoners that this area is so clean due to the prince, a prodigious genius who developed the idea that hygiene is related to diseases. Pet Shop theorizes that this could be another being with knowledge of Earth, and he finally gets the chance to meet him. It's Eddie Montoya. We learn about Eddie's past. A second-generation Mexican-American, he became an elite international agent. After being killed by Pet Shop, he awoke as a 10-year-old boy prince with the name Edward. Using his prior life skills to become an elite politician and scientist, he dreams of becoming king of this world. However, we cut back to the present as Pet Shop confronts Eddie once again. Rather cowardly, Eddie passes out from shock. A servant enters the room and Pet Shop pretends to be a giant stuffed bear. Realizing the prince is asleep, he draws a knife to murder him. Pet Shop intervenes for some reason, and the other guards rush in to kill them both. Our protagonist escapes with Eddie and saves him. However, Eddie's father then tells his soldiers to protect Eddie at all costs. However, it seems a menacing plot of betrayal is unfolding. Pet Shop tells his once betrayer that he won't kill him again. He manages to convince Eddie to work with him, and they agree to form a team. Both of them think the other will be useful to their desires, despite not really trusting the other. They both think that they're using the other, ironically. Together, they decide to get to the bottom of whatever is happening, including the assassination plot against Eddie. Montoya then elaborates on the history of Santo Canalgo, including the history of the Great Edward, a former king of the city. He then elaborates on the Canalgo history, who have been rich for as long as time itself. However, However, their wealth is directly linked to the crown, which explains the assassination plot against the former international agent. They return to the city and confront the men responsible. The Baron sentences Canalgo to imprisonment, and Eddie reminds him that he will be tortured excruciatingly. We find out how Pet Shop was able to convince the Baron that he was a noble using his transformative skills. The Baron then tells Mr. Kim and Eddie about the plot against them from the Mutalamagus, or Heralds of Death. Pet Shop then pretends he's heard of them in order to sow more suspicion in court, though he also uses the opportunity to make the Baron fear and respect him. Eddie later reveals that he already knows who's in charge of the Mutalamagus. While they drive away in a carriage, they discuss their specific skills and abilities acquired throughout their journeys. It seems as though they have different limitations and capabilities, and Eddie realizes that he can only use his discernment ability on Pet Shop's non-earthly acquired abilities. They eventually arrive at their destination, which is said to house the leader of the assassins. On approach, the man responsible is old, withered, and decrepit, and he calls Eddie his son. As Eddie greets his father, Pet Shop can sense brewing tension between the two. Pet Shop introduces himself, and the king sees potential in him. He even goes as far as to ask Eddie if he can have Pet Shop, though the international agent declines his request on the basis that they are good friends, even brothers. Furious at this denial, the king kicks them out of the palace. Rightly so. The newly formed pair of brothers enjoy a drink together. While drunk, it's clear Eddie has plenty of contempt for his father, though Pet Shop finds this quite hypocritical. Before anything else happens, a beautiful blonde girl runs into the room. However, Pet Shop, completely unaware of her identity, threatens her and forbids her from nearing the prince. Eddie apologizes on behalf of his protector to the girl, who we find out is Eddie's dear sister. After she leaves, Eddie reveals something sinister. He hates his sister as she's the one empowered by a goddess, even suggesting that she's the first person Eddie will execute once he becomes king. He even reveals that she is in love with him, despite them being half-siblings. It even turns out that Eleanor's mother could be the one responsible for Eddie's mother's murder, heightening the political intrigue and suspicion within this kingdom. Pet Shop asks why Eddie is so opposed to the king, and it turns out that this is related to the first prince. However, Montoya can't divulge any information as he apparently swore an oath to a goddess preventing him from talking about it. However, before the chapter comes to a close, Eddie bumps into a face he hasn't seen in a long time. His brother, the warrior, prophesied to defeat Pet Shop. Before we find out more, we cut back to the king, who has been dwelling on his anger since his son's departure. He seems to have fixated on his son taking on a sworn brother, which he sees as the ultimate insult. He reveals the history of his children and their purposes, including how the first son was originally intended to be king, though he left to become the sworn warrior of a goddess. The king also reveals how much he hates Eddie and would do anything to stop him from becoming king, including making his daughter regent instead. We return to Eddie and Pet Shop, who have bumped into the warrior. Pet Shop ruminates to himself that this new figure could be a major roadblock to his plan. In the royal council, the warrior reveals that he was recently given the power of the holy light by the goddess. In light of this, he wants the royal army for an expedition. The king then agrees. Later on, Eddie reveals the existence of a demon king who leads the demons. The warrior, created by the goddess, is the antithesis of the demon king, and his sole purpose is to oppose him. The power of the holy light is an axiom that says that even if you kill the king of another race, the deity will not question it as a sin, and so the warrior can kill the demon king without fearing eternal judgment. This is an issue for Eddie, as the king can command him to partake in battle, which expectedly is exactly what happens next. As they ride out to battle, two Mutalamagus attempt to assassinate Eddie once again, though it seems as though Pet Shop and Eddie are prepared for this attempt. Somehow, the assassins slowly drop off, one by one, and we see exactly how it happens at the end of the chapter. Pet Shop fully transforms into a monster and heads off against the assassins. They fight back using magic. However, Pet Shop is unfazed. He uses the magic absorbed from eating a dragon to decimate the attacks, and he brutally slaughters the knights with the help of Eddie's light magic and quantum rays. Later on, they discuss with each other what to do about the assassination attempts, and they both decide they should just let them keep coming. They also discuss what to do about the warrior and what the rules are on his death. Essentially, if he dies in battle against the Demon King, the humans are doomed. Pet Shop isn't really bothered by this at all, which angers Eddie. Eddie then talks about other monsters and someone called Saintus, who he says was an idiot. It seems that Eddie and this Saintus are bound via magic, though they challenge each other to constant fights. However, after the fight, Pet Shop takes Eddie by the neck, reminding him that he is not his babysitter. Could this be a reminder that Eddie and Pet Shop's fraternal friendship is merely a farce, and they are going to one day turn on each other? The warrior's introduction to battle is not flashy, audacious, or boastful. Instead, he's humble and wears the apparel of a regular knight. His arrival is no different to that of the other soldiers, and it seems the army respects this. He greets Saintus for what seems like their first interaction in a while, and he greets Eddie once again. He finally introduces himself to Pet Shop for the first time, and as he's doing this, he thinks that Eddie is acting like an infant. Regardless, the warrior informs them all of the dangers faced fighting the Demon King, and they all agree to follow. With that, the warrior announces the formation of the Demon King subjugation party. However, before they finish, a shadowy figure mocks them from a distance. We're introduced to the 7th Demon General, or Oman, who is called Francis, the Pride Lord. He announces that after this, nothing is left to happen except for total war. Then the strange figure reveals something terrifying to the party. They're in demon territory now. The villagers all transform from humans to demons, and a battle between good and evil begins. We learn about the nature of werewolves, and that they're the lowest form of demon. Everyone knows the werewolves will not be powerful enough to defeat the Demon King subjugation party, though it's worth a try anyway. Eddie is the first one under attack, though he uses his powerful light magic to form a shield and quantum rays. He easily annihilates the first werewolf, and Saintus is the next one under attack. Despite looking docile and unassuming, Francis is shocked to learn just how aggressive her fighting style is. She crushes a werewolf in one punch, and the Pride Lord takes note. The warrior then reveals his traditional fighting style and honor, though regardless, he is ruthless enough to slaughter a baby werewolf. Francis is just about to leave, before realizing Pet Shop is no longer there. He wonders where he is before realizing he's behind him. He's slaughtered in one attack from the beast, and later on, the other demon generals gather to discuss his death. They also reveal that the title of the 7 demon generals is simply a facade to conceal the existence of the 4 great lords. However, that's not all they reveal. It also turns out that they are nearly undefeatable, thanks to their success in overriding the limitations impressed by the goddess. The Demon King subjugation party have no idea of the danger they're approaching. We get back to the Demon King subjugation party, who have dealt with the first attack from the demons. In the aftermath of the battle, the warrior recognizes Francis. Their recognition of him and his moniker of pride leads them into the demon's trap. They think that, like there are 7 deadly sins, there will also be 7 demon lords to overcome. Meanwhile, it seems as though Pet Shop is hungry to consume the werewolves, while Eddie is slightly suspicious that the demon's real target might even be him. They also theorize that the Demon King discarded Francis for some reason, and that Demon Society is undergoing rapid changes as they no longer need their Master of Secrets and information. Eddie and Pet Shop continue theorizing, this time of a third one, in the Demon Kingdom. Eddie being the first visitor from Earth, and Pet Shop being the second. Could the Demon King be the third? They think that this could be a good opportunity to get rid of the nun, Saintus, and the warrior. Later on, they bury the werewolves, and rather embarrassingly, the prince has to steer the horse and carriage, as the others aren't capable or permitted by their circumstances. The 2 from Earth converse in Russian so as not to be understood by the warrior and the nun. They plan how to kill the warrior. However, the nun interrupts them pretty swiftly. Later on, the warrior questions Mr. Kim about his circumstances and how he became the prince's friend. However, his warrior's code causes him pain due to the doctrine, "Thou shalt not favor one over another." During their conversation, the warrior reveals there is a reward for subjugating the Demon King, and that seems to perk Mr. Kim right up. When they arrive in Acropolis, Pet Shop tells Eddie about the reward, and he seems even more invigorated than before. They wake up the next morning after a night of drinking, and what seems like a normal hangover turns out to be something much more sinister. Eddie keels over after seemingly being poisoned, and the only person who doesn't seem affected is Pet Shop. Meanwhile, a local is being helped by the warrior, who thanks him by brutally insulting him. The local reveals his identity alongside a crowd of other locals who also join in. In synchronicity, city, they label themselves as Paris, the Gluttony Lord. He reveals he has released parasitic eggs throughout the city's water supply, and this poses a huge problem for the warrior, who can't harm innocents. It gets even worse when he sees his beloved younger brother, Saintus, and Pet Shop standing on top of a tower. Paris orders Eddie to mutilate himself, though Pet Shop, unaffected by the parasites, ends this farce. He jumps down with Saintus and Eddie, and he joins the warrior in the fight. Pet Shop begins to annihilate the parasite-infected innocents, and it quickly looks as though this could be a terrible bloodbath. It seems as though this is part of his plan to make Paris feel guilty that innocents are being murdered, though the reality is that he's using it to triangulate the Gluttony Lord's location. Pet Shop finds him, and before the Demon Lord can escape, he has him in his claws. Pet Shop seems excited that Paris has abilities never before seen. However, it seems that Paris has one last trick up his sleeve. The parasite burrows deep into Pet Shop's stomach, though it's an act performed entirely in vain. Much like we saw with the slime, Pet Shop's stomach can digest anything and absorb the abilities of any living being. And so with that, Pet Shop gains the ability to control living organisms using parasites. Later on, the Demon Kings discuss Paris' death, and they start to realize that Pet Shop could be a danger to them all. Their next answer is Wrath, the next strongest Demon Lord. Meanwhile, the warrior and Pet Shop have a small debate over the methods the Earthling used to kill the innocents. The warrior realizes that Mr. Kim is really no different from the demons, although before they can continue, Eddie raises their attention. A giant beast is on its way, and it calls itself Dracus, the Wrath Lord. It states that it is here to avenge Paris, and Eddie is rather scared. He reveals he's read tales of Dracus and its immense power, which is proven as Dracus towers over everything in sight. Regardless, Saintus brings them to their senses and compels them to fight. Dracus opens his attacks by whipping his tail across the landscape. His attacks destroy the land and fell trees in one swoop, and the subjugation party find themselves partly buried underground. They escape, and the warrior leads the charge in the attack against the beast. Saintus, Eddie, and the warrior all try and come up with a solution. However, they realize they are all powerless against the sheer size of Dracus. However, Pet Shop puts himself forward and thinks he can match the beast in terms of strength. The warrior joins him and attacks with his divine sword, whose power scales against even demons. However, Dracus isn't easily affected by this attack. It seems as though the attack was hopeless, although it seems that Pet Shop was using this attack as a facade, and that he will perform the real attack on a scar on Dracus's stomach. With troll muscles, a mole's body, and dragon's claws, Pet Shop bursts through the ground and darts through the air into Dracus's vulnerable body. Inside of his giant body, Pet Shop unleashes his parasites. However, this isn't all he's after, as he burrows further and finds something incredibly valuable. Meanwhile, Dracus seems to be going slightly insane. He begs for mercy and complains that his stomach is burning. He falls to the floor, and within an instant, he is dead. Pet Shop emerges from the demon's burst eyeball, and the rest of the subjugation party are nothing but shocked. He notes that eating this giant was quite underwhelming, as he had huge muscles, but they weren't necessarily stronger than a troll's. Similarly, his hide was like leather, though not stronger than a dragon's scales. However, he did have incredibly powerful lungs, giving Pet Shop more powerful exhaust on his dragon's breath, and also incredibly powerful veins due to the giant heart. What's more, each vein had a tiny little muscle in it that acted as a heart, meaning that Pet Shop can continue pumping blood around his body even if his heart is destroyed. Although that's not all. The most important organ, one which we haven't yet seen, gives Pet Shop the ability to fly. The Demon Kings dwell in the aftermath of Wrath, or Dracus's death. And though this might seem like a failure on their behalf, they actually say that things are going exactly to the Demon King's plan, and that the warrior is headed straight for the castle. The Demon King's plan is to continue the massacre against humans until the warrior has no choice but to surrender, and his menacing plans are finished by chance to honor the king from another world, or as we know it, Earth. As they're following his tracks, they find something strange. It seems as though he was on a rampage. Expectedly, Pet Shop and the heroes decimate the demons, although in doing so, they find a map of the Demon Kingdom. They decipher the map and realize that it highlights all of the supply routes to battlefields fields, and it also shows the location of the demon castle. However, rightly so, Eddie is suspicious of the map. There's an abandoned village on the way to the castle that must be of importance, and the warrior's heroic senses corroborate this. A week later, they finally arrive at the suspicious village. Filled with children and women building weapons, they're faced with an intense moral dilemma, which seems to strike the warrior the most. However, Eddie is resilient in his ambition, and proclaims that there are no innocent villagers, and that they are all complicit as they are making weapons that kill humans. The warrior refuses. However, Eddie works around his code in order to make him feel like there's no choice. Pet Shop then begins the slaughter of innocents, and the warrior and Saintess find it impossible to partake. In the aftermath, Eddie and Pet Shop find a gun with a German design, and their suspicions of another visitor from Earth are confirmed. Eddie shows the warrior the gun and tells him that ordinary citizens are going to become soldiers with this weapon, and Eddie's plan seems to fall into place as his brother becomes furious and guilty. The tension is cut as we turn our attention to the Demon Kingdom port city of Stuckpit. We're introduced to a half-boy, half-demon, Midden, who is being castigated by his employers. They complain that he's only moved 20 bags of gunpowder and 10 boxes of coal, and they eventually pay him for his work. He uses the tiny amount of money to pay for food for him and his sister, though it's not enough for both of them, so he starves. The next day at work, he realizes he's grown stronger than the previous shift, and at the same time, he reveals his goal to become one of the 7 demon generals. However, as he says this, a shadowy dragon flies above. It's Pet Shop, who has the ability to fly, thanks to consuming a dragon and dinosaurs' DNA. Pet Shop begins to destroy the town of Stuckpit, and Midden is stuck standing still. Adrenaline kicks in, and he realizes he has to return home to protect his younger sibling. However, he returns home, and it's all been destroyed, his baby sister lying dead in the rubble. Erupting with anger, Midden attacks the near-invincible dragon with his sword, but it's futile, and that is the end of this short-lived story. Meanwhile, the remaining demon lords discuss the recent attacks on their resource stockpiles, and they become suspicious that a dragon is involved. In fact, the dragon's feats are near impossible, and they begin to suspect their own dragon lord, Nate. However, they resolve to send her after Pet Shop, and an epic and terrifying battle looms. Pet Shop laments his growing power as he flies above another demon settlement, and we watch as he ravages another civilization of innocents. However, it might not continue for long as Nate, the Dragon Lord, surveys the skies looking for him. She finds Pet Shop and watches as he eats the bodies of the dead. She tries to use her dragon language on him, however, it's completely useless. Enraged at his arrogance, she transforms into her full dragon state, and they begin an epic fight. His size eclipses Pet Shop's. However, his impenetrable skin protects him. He then releases his defenses, arrogantly experimenting with his own strength, and Nate tries to seize the opportunity. Yet, despite her attack tearing his shoulder to shreds, it regrows nearly instantly. Then, at the height of his hubris, Pet Shop tells her that she's free to go, though this only humiliates the Dragon Lord and her pride. She refuses to flee, and Pet Shop admits he might not have a choice here. However, it seems that when Pet Shop had his shoulder eaten by her, his parasites began to entirely consume her body. And that seems like the end of yet another demon lord. That is, until a powerful spell steals Pet Shop's free will. We watch on as the warrior considers his past and the future he came from, and he fixates on his guilt around not being able to save the demon kingdom. It all seems to boil down to one demon with a particular ability that we don't know anything about. We then return to 30 minutes ago, where Eddie, the warrior, and Saintess are walking as Sir Kim is off fighting. They are swiftly confronted by Bassanio the Greed Lord, otherwise known as Greed. He offers them an alternative to fighting and the deaths of innocents. However, in return, they must partake in his game. Jumping at the chance to save lives, the warrior agrees. Inside, they begin a game of poker. The conditions are that if they win, they can pass through untouched, but if they lose, their souls belong to him. Eddie is convinced the game is rigged. However, Bassanio convinces him using magic. Saintess tries to punch the demon, however the area is under a peaceful enchantment, so he can't be harmed. It turns out that she has a crush on Eddie, and Bassanio uses this to manipulate her into a game, in which she bets her own soul against Eddie's. However, she seems to have a trick up her sleeve. as she's recognized as the gambler of the church. Despite this, she's knocked out by Bassanio's spell, and her soul is taken too. Next up, the warrior must fight. However, it's interrupted by Pet Shop blasting through the doors. The warrior tells Mr. Kim about what has happened, and that violence is useless here. The only possible solution is for them to bet both of their souls in return for the others. He challenges him to a game of rock, paper, scissors. And straight away, he punches Bassanio in the face. This is due to his earthly biology making him immune to skills, and so he can do whatever he wants. Bassanio releases Eddie and Saintus' souls, and for the first time ever, he feels pain. Pet Shop goes on to fight against the other bystanders, although it seems the warrior has had enough of innocent deaths. Pet Shop gives the altruistic fighter an ultimatum. He can either do what's right, or he can retreat, and he chooses the latter. He takes Eddie and Saintus outside and begins a brutal attack on the bystanders. He uses his newly acquired abilities to throw the building up in flames, and in the distance, the warrior considers what is justice and what is right. Meanwhile, we cut back to the Demon Lords, and we finally meet the Demon King, a shadowy young girl. The king clearly is affected by the losses of her lords, though they decide not to let their deaths be in vain. Meanwhile, Greed and Lust decide which of them should face the subjugation party next, and ultimately die. We return to Pet Shop, who reveals that he has a slight vulnerability to fire. However, just in the nick of time, a giant fire-resistant salamander appears. Eddie and Pet Shop discuss their circumstances, and Pet Shop reveals that he managed to convince the warrior to break his code once again, and a third time will result in his constitution being broken. If it does happen again, Eddie can finally kill the warrior. The next time we reconvene with the subjugation party, they are heading off into battle with more demons. We are reminded of their incredible power, and though they may not trust each other fully, it seems as though they've learned to fully operate as a team. However, we learn that in order to kill the warrior, or hero as he's become to be known, you have to overcome something incredibly powerful. That being said, there is one way to overcome the fate that protects him, and that's by stripping him of his title. He's been unking, unrighteous, and the only thing he has left is his sense of justice. He's been unkind, unrighteous, and the only thing he has left is his sense of justice. Eddie then reveals that the old king had previously planned a similar betrayal on the hero in order to make him be a king. However, Eddie found out these plans and has adapted them into his own. Pet Shop then asks Eddie why he's so hell-bent on killing the hero, and it turns out it's not just out of hatred, but vengeance and spitefulness on the king, who was complicit in Eddie's mother's murder. Later on, we return to the subjugation party who make their way to the flat field plains, the stretch of land that leads to the Demon King's castle. They find it weird that there are no guards protecting the castle, nor lava moats or evil swamps. In fact, there's a total absence of life. No bugs, insects, or any wildlife whatsoever. As they move forward, suddenly their horse becomes sick and refuses to continue. They decide to camp out in the open plain overnight while the horse is acting up, though it seems futile. Although within an instant the horse runs away afraid, and the realization sets in that they're surrounded now by a powerful demonic presence. The ghoulish figure approaches them, and we find out who it is. The hero demands to learn their identity, but the figure refuses to reveal it. He says very little, though he casts a strange spell, and the arms of the dead begin to emerge from the crumbled ground. The Demon Lord raises an army of the dead, and finally reveals his name, Lichmond. We learn of Lichmond's backstory, and that he served 3 different Demon Kings. To complicate matters further, he's also an undead, and not a part of him is living. We also learn about Envy's previous role as the official of the Demon Kingdom. However, his previous Demon King was slain by that time's hero. The subjugation party find out the undead army are resistant to the hero's light magic. But matters become more dangerous when Lichmond reveals that he can use holy magic too, using a Bible of the Church of the Goddess. He reveals that he and all of the undead are all followers of the goddess, and Saintus is only as powerful as the undead soldier thralls. Meanwhile, Pet Shop enjoys a nap in back of the cart. We cut back to the action, and Saintis is struggling to believe the possibility of the undead army. She engages in a technical battle of scripture before Lichmond gets tired of arguing. He orders his army to attack, and they do. Saintis casts a holy barrier, though it does nothing. She's about to be attacked by undead, though Eddie steps up and protects her, as he did many years ago as a child. Her intimate feelings for Eddie begin to disrupt her, though she uses her resolve to resist lust and temptation. She finds her footing and fights back alongside Eddie, and we finally cut back to Pet Shop, who seems to be enjoying his nap. An undead reaches for him, but he snaps himself awake and uses brute force to destroy the corpse. The warrior, for some reason, only now realizes that he can also fight against the undead using his raw strength, which is not something he's used to due to his reliance on light magic. However, for the longest time, it seems fighting back is futile. That is, until a giant dragon comes crashing down on the battlefield. Riding atop the dragon are Eddie, Saintis, and the warrior, and Eddie reveals that Sir Kim has a special ability, though he's been made to promise not to tell. The warrior decides that Pet Shop is a shapeshifter, which is only really half correct. Knowing that demons known as doppelgangers are shapeshifters, he also thinks that Kim is either half demon, half man, or a traitor for the demons. He theorizes further, but thinks that it's impossible that Kim is the consuming beast that kills him in the future. However, the stupid hero is still convinced that the greedy slime he killed was the beast from the future. And so he decides that there's no way Pet Shop could be the monster of destruction. They reach the castle, finally. However, the undead army is marching towards them. They only have 2 hours to slay the Demon King, which doesn't inspire them with much hope. The hero then asks Kim a favor. However, we don't know what it is. The subjugation party then split up into 2 teams. Saintis, Eddie, the hero, and then the Pet Shop goes alone. Where? We don't know. Kim flies off into the air and secretes poison all over the guards around the castle, and then ignites it with a single spark. Meanwhile, Lichmond reveals that the undead are extremely vulnerable to fire, and that he can't partake in protecting the Demon King. But he can do one thing, and that's kill the dragon. Inside the castle, the subjugation party slay demon after demon, searching for their king. Eventually, they find someone, but it's not the king, it's Lust. We meet Julius, the Lust Lord, finally, a demon covered in muscle. His species are known as the Incubus, who seduce humans and consume their life force. We're halfway through learning Julius's backstory before the hero interrupts the narrative and attacks him. All it takes is a single blow from the hero to incapacitate Julius the Lust Lord, and we're reminded of the true power of the hero. However, it seems that the hero's sense of justice may be his own undoing, as he finally sees the Demon King for the first time, and it's just a child. We cut back to Pet Shop, who in the form of a dragon faces off against the undead army. Naively, Lichmond believes that maybe Pet Shop can't even breathe fire, but he's proven wrong. After being covered in oil, Pet Shop breathes a tiny burp of fire onto them, and they're quickly set up in flames. With that, not a single demon general remains. Pet Shop finally approaches the throne room looking for his comrades, but it seems something's not quite right. The hero is shielding the Demon King from Eddie, while espousing altruistic rhetoric. The hero reveals that the Demon King is not just the Demon King, but that her soul is of a different world. Eddie and Pet Shop theorize that there are 3 different ways people are transported to Elmwood. Eddie, for example, was reincarnated. Pet Shop was transported as he was, and the Demon King had her earthly soul put into the body of the Demon King, like a possession. We find out her circumstances, beginning as a lowly office worker and then becoming the Demon King. She used her earthly knowledge to grow the demon's empire exponentially, so much so that the balance between man and beast was heavily outweighed in evil's favor. However, it seems that she's not all evil, and that she begged the hero for mercy, and him being him, he couldn't deny it. Kim and Eddie gaslight the hero, claiming that she's lying and that it's impossible that she came from another world. However, the hero is strong in his resolve and refuses to give in to the others. No more killing, the hero says, as his brother raises a sword against him. Something shatters, and giant rays of white light engulf the room. It takes a moment for the dust to settle, and when it does, Eddie's sword of light can be seen penetrating through not only the hero, but the Demon King too. Life is fleeting for the hero, and the narrator comments on the evil actions of Eddie and Kim that pushed him to break his code. No longer a hero, fate can't protect him, and he dies at the hands of his brother, into whom he had misplaced so much love. Confused and panicking, Saintis moves to heal the hero. However, Pet Shop bears his true fangs, quite literally, and eats her whole. In a flashback, we see Kim and Eddie scheming the murder of both Hero and the Saintis, in which Eddie reveals that the priest is actually immortal. The only way to kill her is to destroy her body and soul entirely. However, that's not a problem for Pet Shop, whose insides are capable of sending anything to some ethereal dimension. Back to the throne room, they discuss what to do and realize that perhaps now the goddess could appear and grant them their wish. As they say this, the air around them begins to glow, and maybe they were right. Pet Shop is transported to a limbo-like dimension, and he meets the goddess, an anthropomorphic cuboid. The goddess appears to those in the form of their preferred woman, though Kim is not in the same database as the citizens of Elmwood, and she also reveals that goddesses are in charge of managing skills and statuses, alongside the spawning of monsters. The goddess seems to confirm suspicions and theories that the world is a product of Earth, and isn't quite a real place, more like a game. She goes as far to thank Pet Shop for killing both the hero and the Demon King, both of whom contributed to the power imbalance in the world. Finally, Pet Shop asks for his wish to be granted, and that's for him to be sent back to Earth. The goddess contemplates this request and lets Pet Shop know the bad news. It's impossible. This is due to the limitations set by the goddess that prevents being affected by one dimension from entering another. Pet Shop, however, being the genius that he is, immediately finds a workaround, and if he can get back to Earth using his own strength, it's possible. However, before it's Eddie's turn to talk to the goddess, Pet Shop changes his request and demands to learn knowledge of all living creatures in existence, with an emphasis on those with transcendental powers. However, as they aren't all rendered into the game yet, the goddess gives him the opportunity to spawn one transcendental being of his choice. However, Pet Shop then decides to postpone his wish in the hopes that it will prevent him from becoming complacent. Kim then returns to Elmwood and waits for Eddie's return. Finally, his brother-in-arms returns. However, he's crying. Pet Shop theorizes that he saw Saintis in the Limbo realm, and Eddie reasserts that he has no regrets. Eddie then reveals his wish, and that is knowledge on how to send Pet Shop back. However, he doesn't quite reveal it just yet. He also suggests that the reason he's keen on returning Pet Shop to Earth is that he wouldn't be able to handle someone more powerful than him in existence. We cut back to the humans defending their civilizations from the lingering dregs of the demon armies, and they're massively overpowered and a slaughter soon begins. However, something in the sky swoops down to protect them, and it's Eddie riding on the back of a monolithic dragon. Sometime after the battle, soldiers are telling the king how Eddie was able to defeat the demon army and that he saved the kingdom, and they reveal that Eddie has control over a dragon, or so they think. They hail him the hero of humanity, despite the king clearly hating the idea of this. He then comes to the conclusion that Eddie killed the hero and Saintis. After consulting an oracle, the king realizes that the prince may have truly saved mankind, and that perhaps he could really have changed. In fact, he even displays an inkling of remorse for how he treated his son. We later learn how Eddie refused to return to his kingdom straight away, and carried on traveling Grand Cantine in order to defeat the remnants of the army. A few days later, and they're done. They return finally, and are due to have an audience with the king. Tensions are high in the courtroom, and they finally greet each other. However, before they can talk, Eddie draws his sword, and his succession to the throne begins. In an instant, he slices clean through the heads of a few guards, and the king is utterly defenseless. His elite assassins are stuck in their tracks, afraid of going up against the man who slew the Demon King. We find out that it's in fact Pet Shop's doing, and he's controlling them using Paris's parasitic abilities to brainwash them all. Finally, Edward gets revenge on the man who killed his mother and had the love of his life committed to the church, and the sword of light goes deep into his chest. Finally, Eddie takes the cloak and crown from his father and sits on the blood-soaked throne for the first time. Later that night, we watch as Eddie talks to the ghost of the brother he murdered, and he reveals that in order to send Pet Shop back to Earth, he needs to start an epic of war in Elmwood. Sometime in the future, Eddie's reign is underway, and strangely, Pet Shop is writing a novel. He hopes that when he returns to Earth, he can sell the novel in order to make money. He calls it Epicurean Travels in a Fantasy World. However, Eddie offers his own creative input and suggests I grow stronger by eating. Before they get carried away in their discussions of literature and business, they decide to rather talk about how to send Pet Shop back to Earth. They have to kill the king of each species in order to offer up to the goddess. This includes the elves, dwarves, hybrids, and the lizard men. However, this isn't an easy task. Realistically, the humans are massively overpowered by the other species. Eddie then gives Pet Shop a bounty list, and the protagonist is suddenly angered that he's being ordered around. Then he realizes what he really is, a treasure map. Eddie gives him the title of Royal Secret Investigator, and he sets off on his mission to consume, with the intentions to return in a year for Eddie's coronation. After his sworn brother leaves, Eddie then chatters with an assassin lingering in the shadows of the room, and suspicions are raised around the new prince. Could he be enacting a plot to have Pet Shop killed? We find out how Eddie took control of the royal assassins, and how he also controls the royal guard, both of which are the only two military forces who are allowed to leave the kingdom freely. We cut back to Pet Shop, who has swapped out his armor for much more lightweight enchanted apparel. Finally, Pet Shop hangs up political suit of armor, and now he dons a much more exciting one, and it's for adventure. Pet Shop reveals some emotional backstory, mainly that he was never capable of having a normal life. He reveals that all he could do was read, as any other hobby was too dangerous. Despite picking it up reluctantly, he soon began to love reading. However, the lack of quality literature in Elmwood is a huge problem. He soon begins to love something else: music and spoken word. We meet Phileena Greensmith, a cute student bard who soon becomes disgruntled with society. She arrives in Santo Febro and enters a dangerous inn, and as expected, our protagonist sits in there. Phileena begins a song about the prince who toppled the demon king and the knight who controls the dragon. The beautiful song unites the inn, and dangerous adventurers and mercenaries join arms. Her hat is soon filled with coins. However, she soon becomes sick of the song. However, before she gets to the best bit, a mercenary raises a fist to a shadowy stranger laughing in the inn. Phileena plans to sing a song about mercenaries in the hopes that they will tip her following on from beating up the adventurer. But we soon see a horrifying incident. The man, who we know as Pet Shop, fights off against the mercenary, and his friends join in. As expected, Pet Shop obliterates them all, and Phileena flees into the night. However, before Pet Shop can finish murdering the mercs, another shadowy figure emerges and reveals their identity: Holy Knight, Fiacred. She hails from the Church State, a place modeled after Earth's Vatican City. Their Holy Knights are known as some of the most powerful beings in this universe, and many of them have transcended human states. The Holy Knight, like the Saintess, is essentially a human weapon. However, they are extremely costly and time-consuming to rear. However, it's important to note that she is not exactly as powerful as the Saintess, yet still incredibly potent. Wanting to avoid trouble with the Church State, Pet Shop drops the mercenary, and the Holy Knight is shocked at his obedience. In fact, she almost seems infatuated and embarrassed at Pet Shop. Could it be that she's interested in him? However, Pet Shop swiftly leaves the inn, and we learn a little more about the Febro country and its political and sociological history, mainly that it has seen a recent economic boom. However, there's a disturbing social hierarchy founded upon the oppression of refugees, the original Febro citizens becoming the middle class, and the mercenaries taking up positions of control and power. We find out how Pet Shop learns all this information, and it's from a royal assassin. And it turns out that Pet Shop is currently engaged in a plot to execute a coup d'etat in Febro country. However, a giant band of mercenaries soon approaches him, and it looks as though he could have significant trouble on his hands. The band of mercenaries, led by an insecure balding man, are calling out for Pet Shop, though a drunken man steps out instead. Suddenly, from the shadows, an arrow flies into the drunkard's chest, killing him, and the mercenaries are to blame. At least that's what the people of Febro Santo think, when in reality the man was murdered by Pet Shop's assassin in order to begin the revolution. We then learn who the drunkard is, and it's Pet Shop disguised as a villager. The plot unfolds interestingly. In an expository flashback, the narrator informs us of the Count of Febro, an evil autocrat who cares more about his own personal finances than the well-being of his citizens. It's Pet Shop's plan to overthrow him, partly due to the disproportionate distribution of wealth in Fabro country. Pet Shop finds a village in the outskirts and stays there for a while due to its proximity to a wealth of monsters. He reveals that the last 2 weeks have been an intense training period in which he got used to many of the abilities he's acquired over the past months. We cut back to the present, and we see Pet Shop's plan to have the Count of Fabro replaced unfold. Fearing an uprising, the mercenaries run away, though the citizens are relentless, and they are slaughtered. Eddie calls the uprising the Great Rampage of Santo Fabro. However, it turns out it didn't quite go to plan, as the original citizens of Fabro also chased out the refugees. In response, Eddie decrees laws to prevent anything like this from happening, one of them being that the church and the king can have a lord removed from positions of power. We cut back to Pet Shop, who is heading to Cavalovez, an area with a high surging concentration of griffins, a hybrid of an eagle and a lion. The assassin leaves, though Pet Shop still thinks he's there. When he turns around, he's shocked to find the Holy Knight standing there, who now knows his real identity, and she blushes. We learn more about griffins and their biological weaknesses due to the disharmony of their two body types. Their favorite food is horses, and Pet Shops has been commissioned to protect trade routes used by horse and man. His goal is to either completely destroy the pride of griffins, or at least send them away. While this is interesting, what's even more notable is that Pet Shop seems to have taken on a pupil, the Holy Knight, Fiocred. It seems, however, that this really wasn't Pet Shop's plan, and he's rather begrudgingly going along with it. We watch a flashback that takes us back to the night of the uprising in Santo Fabro, and Fiocred watches on as the royal assassins flee the Count's castle after murdering him. It turns out that Holy Knights are tracked by the church's magic, so killing the witness wasn't an option for Pet Shop. After she began tagging along with him, he tried to get rid of her by setting her near impossible tasks. However, her nearly indestructible body means that these tasks aren't an issue for her. She begins to perform insane tasks that are entirely unreasonable without batting an eyelid, and Pet Shop considers that she could actually be useful. They head to the griffin's nest and she takes them all out. And while Pet Shop initially praises his new student, he actually has very harsh yet constructive criticism for her. He even goes as far as to say she could throw away her sword, which she interprets as an order to give up the knighthood. However, in reality, it's because she's so strong, she doesn't really need a sword, like Sir Kim. He shows her an example of how to fight barehanded, and she's absolutely blown away. Something also seems to change in Pet Shop's mindset, and he decides that he wants one thing more than nothing, and that's to actually teach her. For one reason, she's the same type of monster as him. Kim baits the griffins, and as he does that, he has a flashback to his training in different martial arts, but eventual failure. Pet Shop has no talent, only raw power. He absolutely obliterates the griffins with ease, making use of more of his abilities. Watching on, the Holy Knight begins to rethink all of her training from the church, resenting the limitations set by their doctrines. However, she doesn't give in to her violent impulses, and she rethinks everything now. 3 days later, they're finished killing the griffins, and when they go to collect their bounty, it seems someone is denying them. Convinced someone is stealing from the bounty guild, he accuses the guild of compliance. However, the clerk swiftly threatens him back. Then suddenly, he grabs the clerk's hand and breaks her wrist, demanding an audience with the guild master. We learn the guild master's backstory, who was a former member of the previous hero's party. Having slain the Demon King, he was granted a wish from the goddess, and his wish was to be powerful enough to defeat anyone he previously could not defeat before. It seems that the Guildmaster has a long-standing resentment for the previous king, and also for the current one. This is partly due to the lack of an adventurer in the Demon King subjugation party, and he wants someone from the adventurer class to rise to the rank of hero. We also meet the Guildmaster's son, Jorge Aventuras, who is of two minds about his father's actions. However, it doesn't really matter what he feels, as he's killed by Pet Shop very shortly after his introduction. After injuring the clerk and killing his son, Pet Shop confronts the Guildmaster, who wisely apologizes. Then, very abruptly, Pet Shop leaves, considering the apology enough. Enraged that his son died for an apology, the Guildmaster raises all of his banners and declares Pet Shop, or at least the alter ego he's adopted, a wanted man. We return to the Holy Knight, who is still contemplating her role in the church. However, her thoughts are interrupted by Chance calling for the head of the C-rank adventurer Jack, who Pet Shop is currently posing as. The guild master confronts Pet Shop again and explains the emotions of a father grieving a child, and Pet Shop replies at first maturely by saying he understands, and then sadistically, as he explains he's orphaned many before. After Pet Shop gives him an opening, the guild master attacks and Pet Shop kills him without breaking a sweat. So much for a man with the power to defeat anybody. The guild master's banners then attack, but before Pet Shop can kill them, it seems as though someone else has. His student, Fiocred, stands over their corpses with blood dripping down her body, and it seems she's made her mind up regarding the choice between impulse and the church, and she's given in to violence, finally. She then eats a griffin leg, following in her master's footsteps once more. She then reveals something shocking. She's the same species as Pet Shop. He then sends her on an errand and she leaves. After she's gone, a figure emerges from the shadows, and it's the assassin. He gives Pet Shop a pouch of money, a new identity, and thanks him for the information that the church is performing experiments to make more people like him. Then, Pet Shop thinks about his next location, Santo Carnargo, the place he met Eddie for the first time. Later on, they're in the back of a carriage and they bump into the bard again. She remembers Pet Shop's brutal act in the inn from before, and she seems cautious of him. She tells herself that she needs to get away from them as soon as the carriage stops. And ironically, it does right away. Only a dungeon has appeared, and they have no option but to traverse it. We revisit Eddie's old friend, the Baron of Canargo, who hears about the dungeon. It turns out he hates Julius Aventuras, the guildmaster of Cavalaves, and he receives good news very soon that he's now dead. Sir Kim then arrives and reveals he killed Julius. So the Baron tells him a secret. The dungeon is actually a living organism that burrows out from the ground below. It seems as though the dungeon swallows monsters and turns them into its own thralls, and they then attack anyone else. This is called a dungeon overflow. It also swallows gems, minerals, and treasure, and lowly adventurers choose to enter and farm minerals, but refuse to kill the dungeon so that they can keep revisiting it. This is the situation in Santo Carnargo, and it seems as though it's now Kim's job to kill it. Later on he tries to enter, but he's refused as he's a mercenary, not an adventurer. A foolish mistake as he proceeds to beat them all up viciously. He enters and Fiocred enters as well, though she's wearing a disguise. They both use their shape-shifting abilities to travel through the dungeon with ease, and they bump into their first set of monsters. Pet Shop tells his student to go first, and she begins to violate the monsters. However, the teacher notes differences with his student, that she doesn't ingest organisms to transform, but her abilities are all surgically implanted. She fights off against a huge scorpion-salamander hybrid and brutally destroys it. If anything, she seems more of a monster than Pet Shop. Impressed with her raw power, he asks if other holy knights are like this. However, she affirms that she's the only one. She also reveals she has the ability of a mimic, which is different to whatever Pet Shop is. Happy with this information, he begins to eat the monsters. However, he finds out something horrifying. The monsters aren't alive. The meat is rotten. He notes that the feeling of eating magic-infused meat reminded him of consuming Saintus, who was also magical in biological nature. After realizing he has nothing to gain by staying here, he trudges on with the hopes of finishing off the mission quickly. They continue through the dungeon, though the mood is now sour. Pet Shop begins to vent his anger by obliterating the monsters. He even kills a person, and Fiocred asks why, though he reveals that the man was actually also an undead. Eventually, they close in on the heart of the dungeon, and Fiocred makes the mistake of mocking his tracking ability. Strangely, it seems as though Pet Shop has formed a connection with Paris in his mind, and he seems to have strong feelings of friendship towards him. Could it in fact be possible that Paris isn't dead and lives on in Pet Shop's consciousness? They reach a door and realize there is definitely a powerful monster here. Regardless, they enter, and Pet Shop is shocked by what he sees. It's a wyvern. However, there are some strange things about its biology. Pet Shop theorizes that it's actually a chimera, and that it's formed of many different organisms fused together. He assumes that the dungeon created this creature with magic, and Pet Shop sees something horrifying in the mongrel, a reflection of himself. Fueled by self-hatred and self-disgust, he fights off against it one-on-one, dragon versus wyvern. His roar can be heard outside of the dungeon, and an epic fight happens between the two beasts. Typically, the wyvern is outmatched by Pet Shop, It's almost a fight with no contest, so much so that Kim even holds back to make it more interesting. However, the wyvern begins to hold its own, though not for long. As a last resort, it tries to spurt out venom, though it does nothing to Kim. Finally, he gives the wyvern mercy and kills it with 2 blows. As it flops to the floor, it mutters something and even laughs, then dies. The 2 adventurers continue, and the possibility that the wyvern was still living lingers in Pet Shop's mind. In a break from the action, we learn about the dungeon core, which is the heart of the dungeon. While it seems cute at first, it's actually vicious, vile, and grotesque. However, Pet Shop doesn't kill it straight away. Instead, he picks out a cleaver and begins to chop it up so he can eat it. Firecred throws up while he does this. Finally, he's done, and they make their way out, only there's a legion of guards threatening them. Strangely enough, he doesn't fight back, but instead lets himself be arrested. After having a flashback to his last day on Earth, in which he was chained up in a similar carriage, we end the first season of I Grow Stronger by Eating.